You need to ask yourself, what might compel you to get out of bed in the middle of the night and storm the local embassy, consulate, military base, or government building with 1 million of your brethren and declare war on a country? You have to really ask yourself that question, because that's exactly what has happened in the last few hours. In the middle of the night, millions of Muslims got out of bed and they decided that it is time to go and demand that their governments declare war on Israel. They are storming the embassies, they are storming the consulates. I would not be surprised if we seen a mass expulsion of diplomats and egress of the embassies and consulates, and possibly a withdrawal of U.S. military forces from numerous countries as a result of what has happened in the last 24 hours. This really is a watershed moment. This really is a red line. It's a critical mass. They crossed the line. We're going to talk about the implications of the tragic events of the past 24 hours that just 24 hours ago I warned people was going to happen. I warned people that Iran, one, needed an excuse to enter the war. Well, they got it. I also warned people that we were probably going to bear witness to some of the most egregious displays of indifference towards human life that this generation has ever seen. Well, we got that with a bombing of a hospital in which babies were attached to incubators. Doesn't get much worse than that. Probably one of the most acute and striking displays of violence in an instant that we've seen even in this conflict, barring the initial terrorist attack that precipitated all of this. This really was it, okay? Bombing a hospital is something you just don't do. We'll talk about cui bono, who benefits from this. We'll talk about the reaction from both sides with respect to this. But the other thing I warned was there was a reason why Russia wore the velvet glove in their prosecution of their special military operation. And it is because of this very thing. You can act with impunity for so long. You can show no empathy for your adversary for so long. And this will work when you're the dominant force, when you're fighting a subordinate group who doesn't have the manpower, who relies on guerrilla tactics and asymmetrical warfare. You can get away with a lot, but eventually you cross a line and the tables turn. We are seeing an outpouring of support for the Palestinian cause, the likes of which we've never seen before. And it is going to cause massive civil unrest and disarray. We are seeing politicians today come and speak out that I never thought in a million years would even utter any sort of resistance to that narrative at all. And they are. And that is different. We're living in unprecedented times, and nothing characterizes that more than the events of the last 24 hours. People need to understand how monumental what has just happened. This is huge. Now, there's a lot of division over who caused it, who done it. My own eyes, and based on the context here, before we get into whatever sort of sophistry and misinformation is being pumped out on either side, understand that this area was being bombed heavily. Okay? Hundreds, thousands of bombs had dropped on this general region in the north already. So, reactively, reflexively, people would say, well, this was Israel who did this. The size of the explosion, not something that Hamas typically had in their arsenal unless they got something sent to them by Hezbollah. The size of the explosion was indicative of it. The fact that they were telling hospitals to evacuate prior to this, there was an official statement calling on hospitals that they needed to evacuate the north. They said they couldn't. There's explicit video showing doctors saying we can't evacuate because we have people who rely on ICU. They can't be transported, okay? So there's that to the argument of the one side. To the other side, we have to ask cui bono, because this is completely unstrategic from the perspective of trying to win the PR war. This is terrible. This looks very bad. And Russia knew this. This is why They were so delicate, and you say what you want. Yes, there's been a lot of civilians that have died at the hands of Russia. I'm not saying that. They've committed atrocities as well. I'm not saying they haven't. But they've been a bit more measured. They've been a bit more careful. You can't just be this indiscriminate and haphazard with your wielding of that kind of power. It will backfire, and that it is. They don't have enough bullets to take out every Muslim person in the world who storms the gates, who storms Zion right now. That's what's going to happen, okay? And they're probably going to have to use nukes. And if and when that doesn't work, then that's when, that's when it's please stand by, right? It's incredibly myopic and short-sighted and just terrible judgment on the part of whoever authorized such a thing. As men in war, there's a reason why there's war crimes, okay? And there's a reason why there's ground offensives for this very reason. Because you got to go in. You might lose a guy or two to take out whoever is using the hospital as a human shield. I get that, but that still doesn't give you the license to blow up the hospital, if that was the case. Now again, cui bono, who benefits? Iran benefits in the military-industrial complex. The Israeli people do not benefit from this. The Israeli army does not benefit from this. All they've done is they've just rang the dinner bell. They've just said, hey, come and get us. That's exactly what they did. Is that what they wanted? I don't think that's what they in particular wanted. Maybe there's certain corrupt elements who do want that for their own personal political gain or economic gain, but the Israeli people do not benefit from this at all. This is terrible, terrible strategic tactics. This is genius, diabolical, evil tactics if this was Hamas. To take your own people, as people are people, human life is human life. I weigh all human life equally. But to take your own people and to do this, to awaken the Muslim world, is equally diabolical. It reminds me of that Apocalypse Now clip where Marlon Brando is telling the guy, he's telling that story about how the rebels cut off all the arms of their children so that they couldn't be inoculated as a statement of, you will never break us, you will never be willing to defeat us, because we're showing you the lengths that we're willing to go to defeat you. That's exactly the vibes I get here. Is there is that possibility. Now, like I say, the evidence, my eyes, the evidence that is gracing my eyes seems to indicate that this obviously was just a JDAM bomb dropped by an Israeli warplane or an Israeli missile. This wasn't ordnance that Hamas had at its disposal. But again, we're asking cui bono. So I'm trying to walk a fine line here, and I would tell you if I 100% thought that this was Israel. The only thing that makes me think it was, and that really kind of seals the deal, not the only thing, but this is kind of the icing on the cake for that argument, is the smugness and the complete lack of deference, the impudence demonstrated by the spokespeople for the IDF when they were giving their briefing, their debriefing with the media. They were like practically grinning. They were showing no remorse, no empathy whatsoever. And I can tell you right now, if they proceed in the same direction from here on in, embassies are going to burn. They're already burning in some places. Military bases are going to burn. This situation could get wildly out of control. It's incredible how this microcosm of human conflict has brought out the absolute worst in people. And I warned people about this yesterday. I warned people that they knew that shit was going to hit the fan in spite of the fact that the US wasn't evacuating its citizens. Canada, other countries were. Swiss Airlines is going to be suspending all flight activity to Lebanon at the end of the month. They knew that the shit was going to hit the fan. They had pre-positioned all kinds of military assets. Everything points towards they knew this was going to happen. And I'm just amazed. I'm amazed at how quickly those predictions came true. This could crash everything, guys. The price of oil could skyrocket. like skyrocket. Could you imagine $300 a barrel oil, the economic havoc that is going to wreak if they go to war with Iran, which is very, very possible? Can you imagine how much everything is going to cost? They're going to have to bring in government rationing. And you don't think that other countries are going to take that as an opportunity to go to war with their respective adversaries? North Korea, South Korea, China, Taiwan, Russia, the Baltic states. We are entering just a whirlwind of disaster and chaos, unlike anything we've ever seen before. And it came so quickly. It came slowly, then suddenly, didn't it? Slowly, then suddenly. Unbelievable. Oh, I'm glad I'm a prepper at times like these, man. Wow. I got some messages I have to share with you. But from Istanbul to Cairo to Tehran, they're trying to sack embassies in Istanbul. I don't think Turkey has much longer left in NATO if this movement, if this energy continues in this direction. And if Turkey aligns with the Russians and the Iranian axis, we're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble. The West, that is. This is World War II playing out over and over again. You know, I feel as though that it sometimes seems like the Israelis are being used as pawns to bait this conflict, like this revelatory battle for Zion or whatever sort of biblical thing they're trying to reenact here. That's what it starts to look like. It starts to look like the end of the Matrix series, when all of the hordes descend on Zion and, there's a small group of people that are there fighting. And, maybe we're even going to get Neo, who's the one, Neo Anderson, new son of man. He's meant there to represent Christ. Like that movie, The Matrix, is what's happening right now. Like it's biblical, that whole movie, the Trinity. He chooses Trinity over the people. Like it's, anyways, going on tangents. I'm not a religious person, okay? I can tell you as an agnostic, if my children were blown up in a hospital attached to the ICU, I would spend the rest of my life seeking vengeance. And I'm a rational person, okay? I'm a person who doesn't necessarily, is not 100% convinced I'm going to seek salvation or get salvation in the afterlife, like some people who believe that. Imagine what these people are willing to do. You haven't seen nothing yet. The unrest that we've seen that was just the inflection point. Anyways, let me read this email, a couple of emails, and I'm going to cut it short today because it's been mentally, emotionally, and spiritually exhausting. Yes, I still have a spirit. Jewish surgeon that works under him, let me start at the beginning here, and I'm going to try to not provide any details that might compromise this person's identity. I wanted to let you know some information that I have. It's not much, but I can give you some insight into what's coming. My father is a very prominent surgeon at a well-renowned hospital in the U.S. A Jewish surgeon that works under him came to him yesterday and told him that Israel contacted him about flying over there to be a surgeon for the war. He was telling my dad that Israel plans on a long and brutal war and is preparing for that. They are contacting Jewish surgeons from around the world to fly in as they are short many surgeons and medical professionals. He said they want him to fly to Israel in about 10 days. He said that he's going and he doesn't even know where he's going to be stationed. In my opinion, if Israel is contacting surgeons here in the U.S. to come and aid in the war, something bigger is coming in my opinion. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu said explicitly that they're preparing for a very long, drawn-out, bloody war. I got this other message here, and this one, I wouldn't say it's classified information because what he's saying is quite vague and open source, but I'm not going to be providing details of the country because he says, my father is a brigadier general in the blank army, and brigadier generals are quite rare, so I'm not going to provide any more identifying details. Anyways, he goes on to give me some compliments. And he says here, I have attached here for you under extreme discretion a conversation with my father today regarding the escalation. Remember, this is a brigadier general in a NATO military, okay? This is not classified information because, again, it's vague. So this is not a national security risk. At risk of treason, well, okay, that's a bad way to start, but the information he provides thereafter is not. My father fills me in as best as he can. This is going to escalate, he says. So take it from a brigadier general, the shit's going to hit the fan. Iran has tried everything to broker peace, so we're getting the other perspective now, but America is set on war. They have informed us to begin preparations for the conflict through CIA channels yesterday. There is far more should you be willing to converse discreetly. I'm going to just... Sometimes you gotta know when to walk away, know when to fold them, right? I don't want to know stuff that is going to put me in the crosshairs, but I can use my own intuition. That's what's the basis of all my prognosticating when it comes to these conflicts, and it's been pretty damn on point thus far, I must say, because I try to view things as unbiased and apolitically as possible. As much as I get in slugfests on Twitter once in a while, I still do keep a very open mind, and I hope that is represented today in my analysis of the bombing of the hospital, which, yes, at first appearance, it seems strikingly obvious that this was done by the IDF. I mean, 90%. But when we ask who benefits, it's not them. So either they're really strategically dumb, or they just let it go to their heads, the power that they had, thinking that there wasn't a line. Well, they crossed that line. This is it. Killing babies in hospitals, if it was, I mean, anytime you bring babies into a conflict, it's over, right? That's when people lose their shit, as they should, as I would as a parent. And I'm an empiricist. I would lose my mind and I would spend every waking hour I had left seeking retribution. Even President Erdogan from Turkey today said the attack on the hospital where women, children, and innocent civilians were treated is the latest example of an Israeli attacks that lack the most basic human values. So that's a NATO, the largest army in NATO, conventional force, that are currently in possession of American nuclear weapons. And when I say in possession of, I mean American nuclear weapons are on their territory. They could probably be removed at any time at a moment's notice, but that's a thing, okay? You have pretty much every government, because they know with a predominantly Muslim population, you have to placate them by, in the very least, condemning the act. And it's quite striking to see some people not succumb to the pressure of the PR campaign being put out by the IDF, even in Canada, Canadian media, and basically calling them out. Okay, and risking career suicide by, I just said every possible buzzword you're not supposed to say in a video in this video, as far as the algorithm is concerned, but they're doing it, and that's showing a clear-cut shift that we've never before seen. Never before. And it's just incredible. This is a diabolical stroke of genius by Hamas if they actually did do this. Think about that. The power of being able to get billions, maybe not billions, but millions of Muslims out of their bed in the middle of the night to protest on your behalf. This little corner of the world with a couple million people in it. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. According to my main man, Rafi Farber, a lot of gold has been moved out of the COMEX vaults since the war began. The fastest drain of gold physically from the COMEX, I believe, according to him, ever. The end game is coming. Yes, imagine, I can't imagine the price of stuff if oil goes through the roof, guys. This could get government ration level of SHTF. I think people who have purchased their foods, their freeze-dried foods, their preps right now will be very grateful. And you're going to see how quickly things can get bad. Because it doesn't matter that we've had COVID. It doesn't matter that we've had the riots. It doesn't matter that we've had the climate stuff, the fires, the Ukraine war, the Russia war. People forget, they rest on their laurels. And right when, things start to calm down a bit, Normalcy Norman creeps into my comment section and tells me how nothing bad is ever going to happen. Well, watch how bad things can happen if they close the Strait of Hormuz and the Middle Eastern countries have their arms twisted by their population, who they need, okay? How much time do we got left? 11%. Who they need to keep them in power, and the entire chessboard changes. Putin is laughing his ass off right now. Him and Xi are currently meeting today. They are laughing their ass off, and that's another telltale sign that something is coming down the pike. They're meeting for the Belt and Road Summit or whatever it is, but every time those two meet, something very significant happens shortly thereafter. Hezbollah and Israel are fighting right now. It's a war. It just hasn't been declared a war yet, but it's a war. Russia has initiated the process of pulling out of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. It's over. We're going to start nuclear testing again. There was an airstrike today on Hamas leaders Ismail Haniyeh's family's house, claimed the lives of all of his grandchildren, his brother, and his family. A total of 14 killed. Well, serves him right, some people might say. But again, it's like pulling gray hairs. You pull one, 10 more coming back in this place. And that's all they did. Look at that. Look, I was warning people about this. If you go and you take out a civilian, you might think, hey, easy win, easy picking. But you just created another 10 combatants. Whoever perpetrated this act in the last 24 hours just created millions of combatants. For what? To kill a couple militants using people as human shields? Was it worth it? Stupid, man. So stupid. Dumb. Unless that was their intention. Unless somebody is trying to bait Israel into fighting the entirety of the Muslim world, which is possible. There was a submarine cable in the Baltic, which was severed today. You don't get two of those things happen in the same week. We're really at a point right now where every single fire could just flare up at the same time, where a war in the Baltics could flare up, a war in Taiwan or the Korean Peninsula could flare up, because you don't get a pipeline destroyed and, a cable, I was going to sneeze, in the same week. Of course, they're investigating to see if this was Russia who did it, and NATO has said that there will be consequences if they did it. Turkey travel advisory. National Security Council issues a warning against travel to Turkey and Morocco, citing fears that Israeli travelers will be targets of those angry at the ongoing war. If you're Israeli, I would stay away from any Muslim country right now, because it's probably not a safe place to be. All the signs were there. In hindsight, I do these prognostications, but in hindsight, every indicator was there. Our friend over at Wholesale Freeze-Dried Food, Steve, who is warning us that they're stocking the embassies for this very thing. They're preparing for massive unrest. All the indicators were there. We've been talking about the Middle Eastern issue off and on, and it appears that this just came out of left field. It really came out of left field. Everybody was fixated on what was going on in Russia and Ukraine, and this should be a lesson in how fast the theater of war can shift, or at least the focal point of attention. And we should not take our attention away from what's going on in Ukraine, where the Russians are on the offensive. Isn't that a coincidence? Right when the Russians start going on the offensive in Avdiivka, suddenly the attention is taken away. Well, now Biden is trying to bundle in a $100 billion package that they're trying to fast track through, which might be difficult now. Because originally, when this whole thing started, you had a lot of liberals who were, they were on the side of Israel. But now it's almost like they're trying to make it into a political issue. They're trying to make it into a left-right issue. You got Jagmeet Singh, our NDP leader, far-left leader, coming out today and condemning Israel for the bombing. All right. So you have many people who have chosen a side of the argument, who are not buying what the IDF is saying, which is a testament to just how divisive this issue has become. And never before, ever before, have you seen such an outpouring of support for the Palestinians, ever. This is something that just didn't happen before. And it's all because they shot themselves in the foot. Had Israel said, okay, you committed a despicable act, a terrible act, but we are going to be strategic in how we deal with this. Just like the Russians do, okay? The Russians, they lose the Moskva. They get the Crimean bridge bomb. They don't just react right away and just start blowing shit up because they know there's going to be consequences if they do that. They think it through. And that's what you have to do when you're not in a position of power, when you're just not entitled into a position where you have like a huge advantage militarily. You actually have to think. You have to be meticulous. You have to think about what the next few moves are going to be. They never had to do that. They just push a button and then everybody believes them and they can act with impunity. Well, the Russians, they weren't able to do that. So while they might have wanted to drop a nuke on Ukraine, they restrained themselves from doing so because they knew what the outcome would be. You can't just indiscriminately, wage war on a population causing immense amount of collateral damage. It will eventually backfire. Even with your allies, when they see that, they'll think to themselves, wonder if he's going to do that to me someday, right? If he's that indifferent to human life, maybe whatever sort of alliance we have isn't as strong as I think. So, this was a complete failure of judgment if this was the Israelis. If this was Hamas, it was repulsive to do your own people like that. And again, I'm leaning towards it wasn't because the evidence I can see with my own eyes, and I know, you can take that for whatever it's worth, but they want to sow doubt about it. Doesn't matter. Regardless, the first impression has already been etched in the minds of millions of Muslims around the world, and you're not going to change that. Even if you were to come out, show definitive proof later on that it was in fact Hamas, by then more shit will happen. Now, if they proceed down this road, there's no telling how crazy this situation could spiral out of control and fast. It's already spiraling. They're at war on the Lebanese border. You look at that and that's a war. They're shooting back and forth. They're destroying tanks. And so it's a war. But this thing could go real, real bad because now if they continue, then that just tells you that they're not in touch with reality. Like if they proceed to do more bombardments, if they don't rein it in for a little bit, they gotta rein it in. Why would they do this before Biden came is the question, if it was them. Did they do this intentionally because they needed some shit? Is this like a, Ukraine situation where, they embellish some of the details to try to generate more support? We all remember the S-300 incident with Poland last year where they were screaming that, oh, it was the Russians, and it turned out later it wasn't. Is that what this probably is somewhat? Like, is this an attempt to bring us into a broader conflict? Or is this the Israeli people being used? I don't know. But all I know is the shit's hitting the fan, and I'm glad to be a prepper. This is not rocket science. We live on a finite planet. The low-hanging fruit has been picked. We're in a situation where the climate's getting squirrely. People are getting squirrely. Mental illness, as much as I don't like to blame mental illness for anything, there is a certain mental illness accompanying technology that cannot really be quantified, but it is most certainly manifesting in our behaviors. That's creating problems. Okay, this is just such a tumultuous time, and of course shit's gonna hit the fan. Like, come on. It's going to manifest in some way or the other. You don't need me to tell you this every single frickin' day. But I know there's going to be some dumbass in the comments, if and when this situation dissipates, in spite of the fact that this is completely unprecedented, never before seen in history, okay? In spite of that, and I'm talking about the response now, in spite of that, there's going to be some, slumbering buffoon who, because the mainstream news tells him that everything's okay, he's just going to accept that naively. And I guess that's good for us because that means we're ahead of the curve. Guys, I got to go. Be back with another update tomorrow, and we do have about 10 videos now on deck, prepping videos. It makes no sense in releasing them right now because this situation is unfolding, it's fluid, it's ever evolving, it's ever changing, and we just got to stay on it, okay? So thanks for watching, and yeah, gear up while you can, because this shit could go south fast. We're talking about prices doubling, tripling, quadrupling if they go to war with Iran. It's going to get ugly.